His family branded her a thief. Years later, the billionaire CEO found her washing cars to survive. This love story is a special gift for my lovely family. It was beautifully written by my wonderful wife, Binta. If you skip this story, she might get angry with both you and me. Now let's begin with love. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to leave a comment saying, "Binta, you did an amazing job." The morning they buried her mother, Houston refused to grieve. The sky over Forest Park, Lawndale, was a hard, cloudless blue, and the heat pressed down on the small gathering like a hand on the back of the neck. Tilda Mercer stood at the edge of the grave with her brother's fingers locked inside her own, and she understood, in the way a person understands a door closing in another room, that her childhood had just ended at 24. Milo was 10. He wore a clip-on tie that belonged to a neighbor's son and shoes half a size too small, and he did not cry because he had decided the night before that he would not. Tilda had heard him practicing in the bathroom, breathing in, holding it, breathing out. A 10-year-old teaching himself how to be stone. Their father stood on the other side of the casket. Gil Mercer had the face of a man attending something inconvenient. Beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched, stood Paulette. She had been introduced 8 months earlier as a friend from his shift at the plant. She wore sunglasses to the funeral and checked her phone twice during the prayer. Their mother had been sick for 2 years. Paulette had been in the house for 8 months. Tilda had done the math a long time ago and had chosen, for Milo's sake, not to say the answer out loud. 3 weeks later, the answer said itself. Tilda came home from her shift at the pharmacy on Bel Air Boulevard and found 4 suitcases and 6 garbage bags on the front porch of the house on Nordling Road. Milo was sitting on the steps beside them with his backpack on both shoulders, holding the one framed photograph of their mother that used to hang in the hallway. "Paulette says the house is too crowded," he said. He said it the way he said everything now, flat, careful, stone. Tilda walked past him and tried the door. Her key turned, but the deadbolt was new. She knocked. Then she stopped knocking and pressed her palm flat against the wood, because through the front window she could see her father sitting in his chair with the television on, and she could see that he could see her, and she watched him look back at the screen. She never knocked on that door again. "Where are we going to live?" Milo asked her that night, in a motel off the Gulf Freeway, where the air conditioner coughed like an old man, and the parking lot lights came through the curtain in orange stripes. "Somewhere better," Tilda said. "You always say that, because it's always going to be true." She had $410, a 19-year-old car, and a brother with a heart that did not work the way hearts were supposed to. The murmur had been there since he was born. Every year, a cardiologist at Texas Children's Hospital listened to his chest for a long time, looked at pictures of the valve, and said the same 2 words: watch and wait. Insurance had come through their mother's job. Their mother's job was in the ground on Lawndale Street. 11 days. That was how far the money went if nothing went wrong. And something always went wrong. On the 4th day, a woman at a staffing agency in Greenway Plaza looked at Tilda across a desk and said, "You clean houses before?" "I kept my mother alive in one for 2 years, Tilda said. "I can keep yours clean." The woman looked at her for a moment longer than the question deserved. Then she wrote an address on a card. "Live-in position, River Oaks. They have gone through 3 girls this year, so hold your spine straight. The lady of the house is named Sondra Ambrose, and she does not do second impressions." The Ambrose estate sat behind iron gates on Lazy Lane Boulevard, under oaks so old and so wide, the afternoon underneath them was a different temperature than the rest of Texas. The house rose up pale and enormous at the end of the drive, and Tilda, walking it because her car did not deserve to be seen, counted windows to keep her breathing even. She stopped counting at 30. A housekeeper in her 60s opened the door. She had steady eyes and forearms that had worked for 50 years, and she looked Tilda over the way you check fruit at the market, not unkind, just honest. "I'm Corinne," she said. "Whatever she asks you, answer short. She thinks long answers are lies." Sandra Ambrose received her in a sunroom full of white orchids. She was somewhere past 60 and had decided not to discuss it. Her hair was silver and perfect, her posture was a lesson, and her voice, when she finally used it, was soft in the way that expensive things are soft. She read the agency card. She read Tilda. The second reading took longer. "You have a child," Sandra said. It was not on the card. "A brother. He's 10. He stays with a neighbor while I work." The lie came out smooth because Tilda had practiced it in the motel mirror the way Milo had practiced not crying. Sandra set the card down and aligned it with the edge of the table, and something about the gesture made Tilda understand that everything in this woman's life was aligned with the edge of something. The last 3 girls left because the work was beneath them. Is the work beneath you? "No, Mum, nothing that feeds my family is beneath me." For one moment, something moved behind Sandra's eyes. It was not warmth. It was closer to the flicker of a chess player watching a piece come onto the board. 6 days a week. You'll have the room behind the kitchen. Corinne will teach you the house." She rose, and the interview was over, and she was nearly to the door when she said, without turning around, "This family is watched, discussed, and envied, Miss Mercer. What we are is all we have. Remember that, and we will get along." Tilda lasted 9 days on the lie. On the 9th night, the neighbor from the motel called to say she could not keep the boy anymore, and Tilda stood in the dark kitchen with the phone against her ear and her forehead against the cool of the refrigerator, doing arithmetic that had no answer. She did not hear the man come in. "There's coffee somewhere in this kitchen," said a voice behind her, "and I have never once found it on the first try." He was tall, somewhere near 40, with his tie pulled loose and his sleeves rolled, and he had the tired eyes of a man coming home from a fight he had won without enjoying it. She knew who he was. His photograph sat on the piano. Deacon Ambrose, the son, the one who ran the hotels, the one the staff spoke about the way you speak about weather that has never yet rained on you. She found the coffee on the first try. He watched her do it, and something in his tired face admitted defeat, and it was almost a smile. "You're the new one," he said. "The one my mother hasn't scared off yet." "Not yet, sir." "Give her time." He poured his own cup, which surprised her, and leaned against the counter, which surprised her more. "It's midnight. Why are you standing in a dark kitchen looking like the roof fell on you?" She had answered short for 9 days. She was tired, and the arithmetic had no answer, and there was something in the plainness of the question that reached past her guard before she could raise it. "My brother," she said, "he's 10. The person watching him can't anymore, and I can't lose this job, and I don't have anywhere to put him." She heard herself and stopped. "I'm sorry, sir. That's not your problem." Deacon Ambrose looked at her for a long moment over the coffee cup. Then he looked out the window toward the garage, where a staircase ran up the side to a room that had once housed a driver, back when the family kept one. "There's a room over the garage," he said. "It has a bed and a window unit and a lock. Bring him." "Sir, your mother runs the house," he said, and drank his coffee. "I run the property the house sits on. Bring him. Tell him to stay off the lawn on Thursdays. The gardener is territorial." He rinsed his own cup, set it in the rack, and left the way he came, and Tilda stood in the dark kitchen, listening to her own heart and distrusting every single thing it was doing. Milo arrived the next evening with his backpack on both shoulders and their mother's photograph under his arm. He stopped at the foot of the garage stairs and looked up at the great pale house glowing through the oaks. "Do they know we're not like them?" he asked. "They know," Tilda said. "Carry your own bag anyway." From the tall window at the end of the second-floor hallway, Sondra Ambrose stood and watched the housekeeper walk a small boy and one cardboard box across her drive. She stood there a long time after they had gone, still as one of her orchids, and her face gave away nothing at all, because everything in it was aligned with the edge of something. Corinne, passing with the linens, saw her at the window and slowed. "Mom?" "Nothing," Sondra said softly, watching the light come on in the room over the garage. "Just learning the board." Chapter 2. A year of small rooms. Love did not arrive at the Ambrose house the way it arrives in songs. It arrived the way weather arrives, slowly in small readings, until one day the whole climate has changed and nobody can point to the hour it happened. It arrived in the kitchen mostly, because the kitchen was the only room in that enormous house where anyone told the truth. Deacon Ambrose came home late 3 or 4 nights a week, and Tilda learned his sounds the way you learn a house. The gate motor, the car door, the particular weight of his footsteps when the day had gone badly. She began leaving a plate for him in the warming drawer, nothing announced, nothing asked, and he began eating it standing at the counter so that she would not have to reset the dining room at midnight. Neither of them ever mentioned the arrangement out loud. That was how they both knew it mattered. He asked her questions no one in that house had ever asked her, not the polite kind that wait for their turn to end. Real ones. What her mother had been like. Whether Milo slept all right over the garage. Why she read the newspaper back to front. Sports first, she told him. Somebody wins in sports. I like to start with a page where somebody wins. He laughed, and then he stopped laughing and looked at her as if she had said something that would require rearranging furniture inside him. And after that night, he started reading the paper back to front too. Milo colonized the property an inch at a time, the way boys do. He did his homework at the kitchen island because the light was good and because Corinne fed him without ever appearing to. He learned the gardener's Thursday territories. He learned that the man in the big house was not to be bothered, and then he learned that the man in the big house did not agree with that rule because Deacon began stopping at the island on his way through, glancing at the homework and leaving behind small corrections and one time a better pencil. "He carries the 1, Milo reported to his sister, in his head, without writing it. Some people can do that. He said Mom would be proud of my handwriting. How does he know about Mom?" "I don't know," Tilda said, and she did know, and the knowing sat warm and dangerous in her chest all evening, because she had only mentioned their mother once, briefly, at midnight, in a dark kitchen, and he had kept it. The insults, when they came in daylight, and wore good clothes. Whitley Ambrose was 31, Deacon's younger sister, and she moved through the house in a state of permanent audition for her mother's approval. She was not clever the way Sondra was clever, and some part of her knew it, and that made her cruel in ways her mother never bothered to be. It was Whitley who left the price tags on things. A scarf discarded on a chair for donation, tag attached, $400, placed where the housekeeper would have to fold it. A single shoe worth a month of Tilda's salary left on the stairs to be carried up. "Be careful with those," Whitley said, watching from the landing. "They cost more than you do." "Then they should carry themselves," Tilda said pleasantly, and carried them anyway, and Whitley stood on the landing with her mouth slightly open, unable to locate the exact site of the wound. Sondra's methods had better tailoring. At her spring luncheon, she guided a senator's wife through the hall with a hand on her elbow and paused at the kitchen door where Tilda stood arranging glasses on a tray. "Our housekeeper," Sondra said, in the voice you use for describing renovations. "And there's a little brother tucked over the garage, our own small charity." The senator's wife made the sound polite women make. Sondra smiled at Tilda for exactly as long as courtesy required and moved on, and the whole exchange had taken 9 seconds and would take Tilda 9 days to stop hearing. In August at 2 in the morning, Milo's heart forgot its manners. He appeared at the door of Tilda's room behind the kitchen, grey-faced, one hand flat on his chest, saying it feels funny, it feels fast, and Tilda's whole life narrowed to a point. She was carrying him toward her car, half his weight, all her fear, when the garage lights came on and Deacon crossed the drive in a t-shirt with his keys already in his hand. "Mine's faster," he said, and that was the entire discussion. He drove them to Texas Children's the way pilots fly, calm and fast and lawful only in spirit, one hand on the wheel and the other reaching back once, briefly, to steady the boy through a hard turn. He parked wrong at the emergency entrance and did not care. He sat in the waiting room through the small, brutal hours in his t-shirt among the coughing children and the exhausted mothers, this man whose name was on a downtown building, and when the doctor finally came out and said the words, "episode and monitor and not tonight," the danger has passed for tonight. Deacon put his head down into his hands for a moment, and Tilda watched him do it, and something in her finished changing climates. "You didn't have to stay," she said in the corridor near dawn. "I know. Why did you?" He looked at her for a long time. Hospital light is honest light, and neither of them was hiding well by then. "Because when he grabbed his chest," Deacon said, "so did I." They did not touch. He drove them home through the empty streets as the sky went from black to grey to the fragile gold that Houston does better than anywhere. And Milo slept against his sister in the back seat, and nobody said anything, and everything got said. After that night there was no more pretending, at least not to each other. There began a private country with a population of 3. Deacon taught Milo to throw a spiral on the back lawn on Thursdays, in open defiance of the gardener. Tilda started leaving the sports page folded on top. Once, only once, coming in soaked from a September storm, Deacon took her hand to steady himself while he pulled off a ruined shoe and then did not give the hand back for a moment longer than balance required, and the moment sat between them afterward like a lit lamp in a window. "You know what this is," Corinne said to her one evening, not unkindly, drying the same platter for the 3rd time. "It isn't anything." 30 years I've worked in this house," Corinne said. "I have watched that woman upstairs end things that were nothing. Nothing is not a protection here, baby. Nothing is a target." Tilda looked at her hands in the sink water. "Then what should I do?" "Same thing I do," Corinne said. "See everything, say nothing, and keep your bags packable." She set the platter down, and her voice went quieter than the room. "That boy over the garage laughs now. He didn't when he came. Whatever you decide, decide knowing what it costs." The end of it, the end of the safe part, came in October, and it came the way disasters usually come. Sideways through a stranger over something small. Sandra hosted a dinner for 20, and the caterer brought his own people, and one of them, a young woman ferrying trays, went looking for the pantry and found the wrong door first. What she saw through the gap lasted 3 seconds. The housekeeper reaching up to a high shelf, the son of the house steadying the ladder, then taking the jar from her hands, then taking her hand with it and holding on, and the two of them standing in the pantry light laughing at something no one else would ever find funny, close together, unmistakable to anyone who had ever been in love or near it. 3 seconds. The caterer's assistant backed away and said nothing, because it was not her house and not her business. But it became her business 2 hours later, when Whitley Ambrose, bored and prowling the edges of her mother's party, caught her smiling at nothing in the hallway, and demanded, in the way of people who have never once been told no by staff, to know what was so amusing. The girl was 20 and tired, and did not understand what she was holding. She thought she was handing over a piece of gossip. She was handing over a match. Whitley did not go to her brother. She did not go to Tilda. She stood for a moment in the hallway with her champagne, feeling for the first time in years the delicious weight of mattering, and then she went up the great staircase, past the tall window, straight to the one person in the world she had spent her whole life trying to bring things to. Sandra Ambrose listened to her daughter without expression. She asked one question, which was how long, and received no useful answer. Then she patted Whitley's arm, told her she had done exactly right, and turned back to her mirror. In the glass, her face was perfectly calm. Down in the kitchen, faintly, someone was laughing. "Well?" Sandra said softly, to the mirror, to the house, to the board she had been learning for a year. Now we begin. Chapter 3. The Family Meeting. Sandra Ambrose did not raise her voice, because raised voices were for people whose plans had failed, and hers had not begun yet. She began the way she began everything, with a lunch. It was staged for a Sunday, out on the terrace under the oaks, and it was cast like a play. An old friend from the club. The friend's daughter Meredith, recently returned from 3 years in London, lovely in the way of women who have never carried anything heavy, seated by pure coincidence beside Deacon, Whitley, glowing with her new importance, and Sandra at the head of the table, conducting. Deacon understood what the lunch was by the second course. He had grown up inside his mother's productions and knew the smell of one. He was polite to Meredith, who deserved politeness, having been invited into a war she knew nothing about. He answered questions about the hotels in as few words as the hotels could be put into, and when his mother remarked, lightly to the table, that Deacon worked too hard and needed a life that matched his position, he set down his fork. "I have a life," he said. "It's a good one." "A man in your place needs the right partner in it," Sandra said. "Someone suitable." Suitable. He turned the word over, the way he turned over contract language, looking for the trap built into it. Suitable to whom? The table went carefully cheerful. Meredith talked about London. The lunch survived. But Sandra had learned what she had convened the lunch to learn, which was that her son did not flinch anymore when she moved toward the subject, and a son who does not flinch has already decided something. She confirmed it the following week, quietly, from the tall window at the end of the hall. Thursday evening. Her son and the boy from the garage on the back lawn with a football, and the housekeeper on the steps with coffee, laughing, her whole face open, and Deacon looking over at that open face, the way men look at harbours. Sandra watched for 4 minutes. Then she went downstairs and made a telephone call, and 2 days later, while Deacon was downtown, she summoned Tilda to the sunroom. The envelope on the table was thick and white. "Sit," Sandra said. Tilda remained standing, so Sandra continued as though she had sat. "You are competent, unlazy, and more intelligent than your position requires. I respect all three, so I will not waste your intelligence by pretending this is about dust." She touched the envelope. $30,000, a strong reference, a better job in another city already arranged, at a salary that will surprise you. Your brother's school records transfer cleanly. You would be foolish not to take it, and I do not believe you are foolish. I haven't done anything wrong, ma'am. Wrong. Sandra smiled without any of her face joining in. No, you have done something worse than wrong. You have done something inconvenient. She rose and crossed to her orchids and touched one leaf, lightly checking it. My son believes he is a free man. All men believe it. But this family is 100 years of careful, girl. Careful marriages, careful friendships, careful money. He does not get to spend 100 years of careful on a warm face in a kitchen. Then he can tell me that himself. He will never tell you that, Sandra said. That is precisely the problem. She turned around, and for one moment the softness left her voice entirely, and what remained underneath was smooth and cold as the bottom of a river. Take the envelope, Miss Mercer. Tilda looked at it. 11 days of money once, $410 once, a motel with orange stripes on the curtain. The envelope held more than her mother had ever been paid in 2 years of dying. She was not foolish, and she knew exactly what refusing cost, and she heard her own voice come out steadier than she had any right to expect. "My mother cleaned houses too," she said. "She told me the day you let somebody buy your leaving, you never really arrive anywhere again. Thank you for the coffee, Ma'am. I have the silver to finish." She was at the door when Sondra spoke again, gently, almost kindly, which was the most frightening register the woman owned. "For what it is worth," Sondra said, "I gave you the easy door first." Deacon heard about the envelope that same night, not from Tilda, who had decided to carry it alone, but from Corinne, who had carried things alone for 30 years and had watched where that road went. He came into the kitchen still in his coat, and Tilda saw his face and knew that he knew. "How much?" he said. "It doesn't matter." "How much did my mother offer for you to disappear?" Deacon. His name, out loud, for the first time. It stopped him the way weather stops a game. "I said no. It's done." "It is not done." He sat down slowly at the island, in Milo's homework spot, and rubbed his face with both hands. And when he looked up, he looked the way he had looked in the hospital corridor. Honest light. "I had a speech," he said. "I've been building it for about 4 months. It had a restaurant in it, and a better shirt than this one." He laughed once, without much luck. "I love you. I'm not asking you a question yet, because you deserve the restaurant and the shirt. But I am telling my family tonight, because I will not have you ambushed in sunrooms while I am downtown pretending my life is on the 22nd floor. My life is in this kitchen. It has been for a year." Tilda stood very still with a dish towel in her hands, in the room where all the truth in that house got told. "They will never allow it," she said quietly. "They are not being asked to allow it. They are being informed." He told them that night in the living room, with the family assembled and the staff dismissed. Though Corinne, who had 30 years of knowing which doors carried sound, heard every word from the butler's pantry and later gave Tilda the shape of it. Whitley had cried the angry kind. There had been words like disgrace and words like servant, and Deacon had answered them in a voice that never once rose, and the calm of it had frightened Whitley more than shouting, and Sondra had said almost nothing. That was the detail Corinne repeated twice, standing in the kitchen with her arms folded, an old sailor reading a wrong-colored sky. Sondra had listened to her son declare that he intended to marry the housekeeper, that his mind was made, that the family could stand with him or stand aside. And Sondra had smoothed her skirt and said, "Well, you are a grown man," and asked if anyone wanted coffee. 30 years, Corinne said. "I have seen that woman go to war over a seating chart. Her son says that, and she offers coffee." She shook her head slowly. "Baby, listen to me. When Sondra Ambrose stops fighting out loud, it means the fight has moved somewhere you can't see it." Tilda wanted to believe it was surrender. For 9 days, the house even let her. Sondra was cordial. Whitley kept to her wing. Deacon walked around like a man who had put down something heavy. And one evening he brought home brochures from a jeweler on Post Oak and hid them so badly that Milo found them in an hour and had to be sworn to a secrecy that lit the boy up like a stadium. On the 10th day, a van from a security company came up the drive. Technicians spent the afternoon replacing the cameras in the front hall and along the driveway. Newer models, sharper eyes. "The insurance requires it," Sondra explained at dinner, not looking up from her plate. The old system was blind in places. It rained the following Tuesday, a hard October rain off the Gulf, and the house went to bed early. At 20 minutes before 11, a knock came at the door of the room behind the kitchen, and Tilda opened it to find Sondra Ambrose standing in the hallway, dressed as though for daytime, holding a locked attaché case, the color of tobacco. "I need something taken to the gate," Sondra said. "The Merrill family are old friends and older partners, and Hank Merrill is holding some of our things while the vault is serviced. The gold coins, my grandfather's collection." She held the case out. Her voice was ordinary, Errand ordinary. A courier is waiting at the end of the drive. I would send Corinne, but her knees are wet, weather knees. Go on. You'll want an umbrella. Tilda took the case. It was heavier than it looked, the way the truth usually is. Should I have him sign something, Mom? He's been signed for, Sandra said. Just put it in his hands. Down the long, dark drive, the rain came sideways through the oak branches, and the new cameras watched with their sharper eyes. And at the gate, a man in a plain jacket stood beside a plain car with its engine running. He took the case without a word, without a face she would ever be able to describe, and was gone before the umbrella turned. Tilda walked back up the drive through the rain, and the house glowed pale and enormous ahead of her, every window aligned with the edge of something. Behind the tall window on the second floor, a shadow stood watching her come. Chapter 4. 11 seconds of film. The morning after the rain, the house woke up wrong. Tilda felt it before she understood it, the way you feel a fever coming in your knees before your head admits it. Corinne was quiet at the stove. Whitley was downstairs before 9, which had never once happened. And at 10 minutes past 10, a sound came down the great staircase that Tilda had never heard in a year of living behind the kitchen. Sandra Ambrose calling for her son, with fear in her voice. It was beautifully done. Tilda would understand that later, in the years she would spend taking that morning apart and putting it back together in the dark. The tremble was calibrated. The pallor was real, achievable by any disciplined person who skips breakfast and holds her breath. Sandra stood at the door of her study, with one hand at her throat, and told Deacon, told Whitley, told the hall itself, that she had gone to the safe for her grandfather's coin collection, the gold, the century of it, because the vault company was coming at noon, and the safe was empty. That's not possible, Deacon said. Who has the combination? You, me, that's the list. Then explain it to me, Sandra said, and her voice broke on the middle word, a hairline crack engineered to tolerance. 60 years in this family, Deacon. It was your grandfather's. It was going to be yours. The security company arrived within the hour, summoned with a speed that also belonged on the list of things Tilda would take apart later. 2 technicians and a manager sat in the study, with the family standing behind them, and brought up the new cameras, the sharper eyes, the ones the insurance had required. They ran the driveway footage backward through the night. Rain, rain, rain. And then, at 22 minutes before 11, a figure with an umbrella, walking down the drive with a tobacco-colored attaché case. The frame was clean. The new cameras were very good. There was no mistaking the coat, the walk, the face lifted once toward the gate light. There she was, the housekeeper, carrying the Ambrose gold into the dark. And there was the plain car, and the plain man, and the handoff. 4 seconds, no signature, no face. And the car pulling away with a century of the family inside it. 11 seconds of film, end to end. No, Deacon said. He said it before anything else could get said. He said it to the screen, to the room, to the manager whose finger had paused the frame on Tilda's lifted face. There's an explanation. There is, Sandra said softly. It's on the screen. She was sent. Somebody sent her out there. Tilda. He turned because Tilda was in the doorway now, brought by Corinne, still holding the polish rag from the silver, and the whole room turned with him. Your mother sent me, Tilda said. Her own voice sounded far away to her, a radio in another room. Last night, she knocked on my door. She said the vault was being serviced and the coins were going to Mr. Merrill. She said a courier was waiting. The silence that followed had furniture in it. You could have sat down on that silence. I never left my room last night, Sandra said. She said it gently, wonderingly, with the precise sorrow of a woman discovering a wound. Deacon, I took my sleeping pill at 9. Whitley brought it to me. Whitley? I brought it to her at 9, Whitley said. Her eyes were bright and fixed, and she recited it like a lesson, because it was one. I sat with her while she fell asleep. She never left her room. "Check the hallway camera then," Tilda said. "She stood at my door. Check it." The manager checked it. The hallway camera, the new one, the sharper eye outside the kitchen wing, had a gap in its record between 10 and midnight. "A firmware fault," the manager said, frowning. "Not unheard of with fresh installations. The other cameras had run perfectly all night. Only that one. Only those hours." "Convenient," Deacon said very quietly, and for a moment, for one whole breath, he was looking at his mother and not at the screen. And Sondra met his eyes with nothing in hers but grief. 60 years of it, immaculate. "The word you want is devastating," she said. "Call the police or I will." "Nobody is calling the police. We are going to sit down, all of us," and Whitley called the police. She was already in the hallway with her phone, voice pitched to Carrie, saying the words "theft" and "gold and staff," and Deacon went after her, and it was too late. It had been too late since October. It had been too late since a caterer's girl smiled at nothing in a hallway. The officers were courteous. That was somehow the worst of it. 2 of them from Harris County, unfailingly polite, taking the tour of the facts, the empty safe, the 11 seconds, the gap in the hallway record, the housekeeper with a key to everything, and a sick brother, and $400 to her name when she was hired, all of it laid out by Sondra, in the voice of a woman being brave, and every fact true, and every truth arranged, the way flowers are true, and a funeral wreath is arranged. "Mom, we're going to need you to come with us," the older officer said to Tilda, and he said it kindly, which made it worse. They came outside to the front steps to do it, because procedure prefers open ground. The morning was rinsed and blue after the rain, the oaks dripping light, and Milo was on the garage stairs with his backpack half on, frozen there on his way to school, watching 2 officers walk his sister out of the big pale house. "Tilda," his voice cracked on the second syllable. 13 months of stone, gone in one word. "It's a mistake, buddy," she called to him, steady, because he was watching, and she had one job left. "Go to school. It's just a mistake. Hands behind your back for me, Mom." And here is the moment. Here is the moment the whole rest of this story lives inside. Deacon came through the front door fast, saying stop, saying wait, and he put himself between Tilda and the officers with his arms half raised, a man about to spend every dollar and every drop of the name Ambrose in one sentence. And his mother's voice came from the doorway behind him, pitched low, for him alone, a lifetime of authority folded into 11 words. "Deacon, the cameras don't lie. Ask yourself what you actually know." 1 second. That is all it was. And Tilda counted it, because time goes slow inside catastrophe, and she had nothing else to do with her hands cuffed behind her. 1 second in which the man who read newspapers back to front, who drove like a pilot to Texas Children's, who had a speech with a restaurant in it, stood between her and the police and did not speak. 1 second in which his eyes went from her face to the doorway, to his mother, to 38 years of the cameras don't lie, and she watched the question move through him like weather. Not conviction. Never conviction. Just the question. What do I actually know? Then it passed, and his face came back, and he said loudly, firmly, finally, "There has been a mistake. She was sent on an errand. I'll have counsel meet her before you finish the paperwork. Tilda, look at me. Say nothing. I'm right behind you." Too late. 1 second too late. They put her in the back of the car, and Deacon walked alongside it down the drive with his hand on the window like a man walking a coffin, and Milo stood on the garage stairs not crying, breathing in, holding it, breathing out, and on the front steps Whitley hugged her mother, and over her daughter's shoulder Sondra Ambrose watched the patrol car pause at the gate, where 12 hours earlier a plain man had taken a tobacco-colored case, and her face gave nothing away, because everything in it was aligned with the edge of something. In the back of the car, the officer glanced at his mirror. Suspects cried at this point mostly, or cursed, or went to stone. This one was doing none of it. She sat straight with her eyes forward and her cuffed hands still, and she was silent for a long mile of river oaks, going past the window, the oaks, the gates, the 100 years of careful. He wondered, she said finally, to the window, to nobody. For 1 second he wondered. The officer, who had heard everything a back seat can produce, found no place to file it and drove on. They processed her into the Harris County Jail at 2:10, and somewhere across the city a phone rang in the office of Hank Merrill, who let it ring 3 times with his hand flat on the desk before he answered, and heard the soft, calm, unhurried voice of Sondra Ambrose, asking whether her family's property had arrived safely, and understood, with a sick and sliding feeling, that the word safely had been chosen for him alone, and that he was going to say yes. He said yes. Chapter 5. The Bargain. The Harris County Jail smelled like bleach losing an argument. Tilda learned the rules of the place in one night because they were the rules of every hard place, and she had been in training for hard places her whole life. Keep your eyes level. Keep your voice down. Want nothing out loud. She lay on the top bunk in the grey hum of the pod and did the only arithmetic left to her. Milo's surgery was in 6 weeks. The preoperative appointment was on the calendar over their little stove in the garage room, circled twice in red by a boy who was afraid of it and would never say so. 6 weeks. She counted it in breaths until morning. The lawyer came the first afternoon, sent and paid for by Deacon, a serious woman with a serious folder, and what was in the folder was the shape of the machine. Theft of property over $300,000 was a first-degree felony in Texas. The gold was appraised, insured, and documented at more than twice that. First degree meant 5 years to 99. It meant that the 11 seconds of film would be shown to 12 strangers, and that the district attorney had a videotape, a missing fortune, and a defendant whose whole account of the night rested on a conversation nobody witnessed with a woman who was medically asleep. They have a story that fits every fact, the lawyer said. Ours doesn't fit yet. We'll get there. But I need you ready for months, not weeks. Bail will be argued Thursday. Months. The calendar with the red circles hung over the little stove, and the machine had months, and Milo's heart had 6 weeks. Sondra Ambrose came on the 3rd day. She came alone, in grey without jewelry, dressed for the visit the way a surgeon dresses for a surgery, and she sat down across the scarred table in the visitation room and looked at Tilda for a while without speaking, the way she had once read her in a sunroom full of orchids. There was no camera trickery left to do, no audience to arrange facts for. What sat across the table was the woman herself, and Tilda understood that she was being shown that woman on purpose, as a courtesy, the way you show a drowning person the shore you're not going to let them reach. I told you I gave you the easy door first, Sondra said. You did this. I moved things that were already lying around, Sondra said. Your poverty, your keyring, my son's softness, a camera's blind hour. Nothing in that film is false, Miss Mercer. You did carry my gold down my drive in the rain. The world runs on footage now, and footage does not care why. Deacon knows why. Deacon hopes why, Sondra said, and the correction was so soft and so exact that it went in like a needle. I stood behind him on those steps. I watched 1 second of doubt go through my son like a stroke. You watched it too. I saw your face when you saw his. She folded her hands. Hope is not a wall, girl. I have spent 60 years learning what hope does under pressure. It bends toward the family. It always bends toward the family. Tilda kept her eyes level, kept her voice down. Say what you came to say. There are two roads. Sandra might have been describing garden paths. The first road, you fight. The trial arrives in 8 months, perhaps 10. You will lose, but suppose you don't. Suppose your lawyer is brilliant. You will still have spent those months in this building because I will see to it that bail becomes complicated, and money makes complications the way rain makes mud. And in 6 weeks, a scheduling difficulty will arise at the foundation that has so generously arranged your brother's operation. Funds get reviewed, committees get cautious about families with criminal proceedings attached. The surgery will not be cancelled, you understand, merely postponed, indefinitely. He is on your father's guardianship now, or will be, once the state notices you in here, and we both know what your father postpones. The room hummed. Somewhere down the corridor, a door clanged and clanged again. And the second road, Tilda said. The second road, you are sensible. From her purse, permitted and inspected, Sandra drew a single sheet of paper and turned it to face across the table. This is a statement. It says that you acted alone, that you were approached by a man whose name you never knew, that you handed over the case for money you never received. It confesses nothing that convicts you. My lawyers are subtle, but it closes every door that leads anywhere near my family. You sign it. Within a week, the district attorney discovers that the evidence has complications. A witness has clouded, and the case dissolves for insufficient proof. These things can be made to happen by people the district attorney golfs with. You will be released. Your brother's operation proceeds exactly on schedule, at the family's expense, at the best cardiac unit in the world, and it succeeds because I pay for things that succeed. And then, you are gone. For the first time, Sandra leaned forward, and her voice came down to the pitch of the thing itself. Out of Houston, out of Texas, out of his life, without a forwarding address, without a letter, without a last look through the gate. You will not tell him why, because the why is the door, and if you leave the door open even a crack, he will spend his fortune walking through it. Break it clean. Make him believe it. You are competent, unlazy, and more intelligent than your position requires. Lie to him like his life depends on it, because your brother's does. Tilda looked at the sheet of paper. The words were typed and reasonable, and each one weighed the same as a boy's heartbeat. He'll look for me. Let him look. The world is large, and I will keep him busy. Sandra sat back. You believe you are choosing between love and your brother. You are not. You are choosing between a hope and a heartbeat. I am many things, Miss Mercer, and I know exactly what they are, but I have never once lied to you, and I am not lying now. Sign it, and the boy lives to be an old man. Fight me, and everything after that is weather. There is a kind of crying that does not reach the face. Tilda did it now, sitting straight, eyes level, voice down, while somewhere behind her ribs a year of small rooms burned to the ground. The plate in the warming drawer, the sports page folded on top, the spiral on the Thursday lawn, the hand not given back in the September storm, the speech with a restaurant in it that she would now never hear. She thought of Milo on the garage stairs, breathing in, holding it, breathing out. "Give me the pen," she said. Sandra watched her sign, and there was no triumph in her face, which was the most terrible thing in the room. Only the calm of a woman confirming that the world was, once again, what she had always known it to be. "For what it is worth," Sandra said, rising, smoothing grey wool, "you were never beneath him. If you had been born 2 streets over from where you were born, I would have chosen you myself." She paused at the door. "That is the apology. There will not be another." The machine, once fed, ran quickly. Within 5 days, the case against Tilda Mercer developed complications. A gap in a camera record grew suddenly troubling to people it had not troubled before. On the 6th day, she was processed out into a bright cold morning, with her shoelaces returned, and a manila envelope of her belongings, and a car that was not Deacon's was waiting, arranged by a grey woman's efficient hand, and in it sat Milo with his backpack on both shoulders and their mother's photograph in his lap, collected from the garage room, along with everything else they owned, which fit in the trunk with room to spare. She had 1 hour of grace, and she knew it, because Deacon's bail motion was being heard across town at that very hour. A hearing that would end with a bailiff's shrug. Released already. No address given. "Where are we going?" Milo asked as Houston began to let go of them, the towers shrinking in the mirror. "Somewhere better." "You always say that." She looked at him, 10 years old, alive, staying alive, and made her voice hold. "Because it's always going to be true." Deacon Ambrose reached the jail 40 minutes after her release and stood in the lobby with a bail that no one needed anymore, saying her name to a clerk who could only shrug. He drove home over the speed limit and took the garage stairs 3 at a time and threw open the door of the room over the garage, and it was empty. Bed stripped, calendar gone from over the stove. Nothing left of them at all, except in the middle of the little table, weighted down with the better pencil he had once left beside a boy's homework, a note in a steady hand, 4 words long. "Don't look for me." He stood in the empty room reading it until the light changed. Below, across the drive, the great pale house glowed through the oaks, and inside it, his mother was having coffee. Chapter 6. 3 winters. The operation took 4 hours and 11 minutes, and Tilda spent every one of them in a waiting room at Texas Children's, 2 floors and 1 lie away from the life she had just amputated, watching the doors the way you watch a horizon. Sondra Ambrose kept her word to the letter. The best unit, the best hands, no delay, no bill. When the surgeon came out and said the words went beautifully, said strong repair, said normal life, Tilda nodded and thanked him and walked calmly to the family restroom and locked the door and sat down on the floor and shook for 10 minutes. And then she washed her face and went back out and began the rest of her life, which had exactly 1 instruction in it. Gone meant gone. Within a month, it meant Colorado. She chose Boulder off the back of a map and the front of a promise, a college town at the foot of mountains, far enough that nobody's road went through it by accident, with a children's cardiology clinic connected to the hospital in Denver, where Milo's records could follow him. They arrived in a January so cold it felt personal, and Tilda stood in the parking lot of a residence motel on 28th Street, watching her brother see real snow for the first time in his life, watching him laugh at it. Actually laugh, hands out, face up, a boy with a repaired heart catching winter on his tongue. That laugh paid for everything. She built the whole ledger of her life on it. The work she found was at a hand car wash 3 blocks up 28th Street, a small stubborn business wedged between the franchises, owned by a woman in her 60s named Dottie Larkin, who had outlived a husband, a recession, and 2 corporate offers, and who conducted her hiring interview in 1 question: "You afraid of cold water?" "I'm not afraid of anything wet," Tilda said, which was very nearly true by then, and Dottie looked at her the way Corinne had once looked at her, fruit at the market, and hired her on the spot. The years that followed do not make a story, because peace never does. They make a life. Tilda's hands learned the work until the work lived in them, wheels and rockers and the black streak under every door handle, and her knuckles cracked every November and healed every April. She took 1 class a semester at the community college on Arapahoe Avenue, bookkeeping, then another, moving through a degree the way you cross a river on stones. Milo grew 4 inches, then 5, joined the cross-country team at his middle school and ran, sanctioned by cardiologists, lungs and valve and all, and Tilda stood at finish lines in the thin, bright altitude, with her heart going harder than any runner's. Dottie fed them Sunday dinners without ever calling them that. She taught Milo to drive in the empty lot behind the wash bays. She asked no questions for 2 entire years, and then one October evening, closing out the register, she asked exactly one. "Whoever he was," Dottie said, "does he know what he lost?" Tilda kept counting the drawer. There was no he. "Sweetheart, I've watched you dry the same clean car for 3 years. Dottie shut the register. Nobody scrubs like that over a nothing. 1,500 miles away in Houston, Deacon Ambrose was proving her right. He had looked the way rich men look, with investigators and databases and retainers, and he had looked the way poor men look, driving at night, walking bus stations, calling shelters. He found nothing, because the trail had been groomed by a grey, efficient hand, and because a woman who grew up with nothing knows better than anyone alive how to become nothing again. There was no lease in her name for a year. The phone died in Texas. The car was sold for cash in Amarillo. The world was large, and someone was keeping him busy in it, feeding his investigators sightings in Atlanta, in Memphis, warm trails that went precisely cold. He changed in ways the family pretended not to catalogue. He moved out of the estate by spring, into an apartment downtown that had a coffee maker and no photographs. He worked with a flat ferocity that grew the company and interested him not at all. At family dinners, which he attended exactly 4 times a year with the effect of a man honoring a treaty, he was courteous to his mother and precise with his sister, and both women told themselves that time was doing its work. Only Corinne knew better, because only Corinne saw him on the other days, the ones nobody scheduled. He would come by the house when Sondra was at the club and stand in the kitchen while Corinne worked, not saying much. Once she found him at the foot of the garage stairs, one hand on the railing, going nowhere. 3 years, and the man was still checking a horizon. Corinne retired in the 3rd October. 50 years of work, 30 in that house, and a small party in the kitchen that Sondra attended for 11 gracious minutes. It was afterward, when the cake was cut and the house had gone quiet, that Corinne asked Deacon to drive her home, and in the car, in the dark, with her handbag square on her lap like a woman testifying, she paid off 30 years of seeing everything and saying nothing. 2 weeks after they took that girl, Corinne said, Mr. Hank Merrill came to the house on a Tuesday. Your mother had me set coffee in the study and dismissed me. I went back for the tray after. Her hands tightened on the bag. The safe was open, baby, and the case was on the desk, tobacco-colored, brass at the corners, the same one off that film they played us. I'd know it in my grave. He brought it back. The car was very quiet. You're certain? I have carried it 3 years, Corinne said. It has not gotten lighter, and it has not gotten less certain. I said nothing because I am 68 years old, and that woman could end me with a phone call, and I am ashamed of every day of it. But I'm retired now, and my pension is federal, and God has been asking me about that tray. She looked at him. The gold never left this family, Deacon. Which means that girl never took it. Which means somebody sent her down that drive on purpose with cameras waiting. Now, you have known your mother longer than I have. You finish the sentence. He finished it that same night at Hank Merrill's front door in Tanglewood, and it did not take fury. It took one look. Hank Merrill had been waiting 3 years for that knock and had aged a decade in the waiting, and when Deacon said quietly, Corinne saw the case come back, the older man's shoulders came down like a scaffold failing, and it all came out in his front hall, in his sock feet. The call the week before the rain. The courier who was really Whitley's driver's cousin, the instruction to hold the gold until things settled, and then the second instruction, the one that never came, so the case had gone back into her safe, and Hank Merrill had golfed with that secret for 3 years because Sondra Ambrose held 20 years of his family's worst paperwork in her other hand. And the girl, Deacon said. Where did she go? I don't know. Before God, I don't. Your mother handled that piece alone. Hank wiped his face. But she paid for something. That much I heard her say once on the phone when she thought the house was empty. She said the surgery is my receipt. He looked up, bewildered by his own sentence. What surgery? Deacon stood very still in the hallway. The boy. The heart. The preoperative date circled twice in red on a calendar over a little stove, a detail he had seen 100 times and understood all at once, standing in another man's front hall, 3 years too late. She had not run from him. She had been priced, and the price had been Milo, and she had paid it the way she paid everything, in full, alone, without a word. It took his investigator 11 days from there, because it was paper now, not people. A foundation grant, a hospital, a records transfer executed the following spring to a pediatric cardiology practice affiliated with a children's hospital in Colorado, follow-up care for a minor patient, Guardian 1 Tilda Mercer, and an address that resolved, after 2 more requests, to Boulder. Deacon flew into Denver on the first Friday of December through the kind of storm that closes lesser airports and drove a rented truck north on Highway 36 with the flat irons coming up out of the weather like the prow of something enormous, and he found the car wash on 28th Street 20 minutes before it closed and did not go in. He stood across the street in the falling snow, a Houston coat in a Colorado winter, and watched through the lit bay door as a woman in a soaked apron worked the wheels of a Subaru, with her sleeves shoved up and her breath showing, 3 winters older, thinner, her hair shorter, her hands cracked and sure, and everything in him that had been standing at the foot of a staircase for 3 years finished climbing it. Then the woman straightened, dragged her wrist across her forehead and looked up, the way you look up when a horizon changes. Across the snow, through the traffic on 28th Street, Tilda Mercer saw him. The hose kept running, forgotten, pooling around her boots. Neither of them moved. The snow came down through the streetlights between them, and the last light of the day went out of the sky, and it was Tilda who ended it. She looked at him for one long breath, 3 winters long. Then she turned off the hose, turned her back, and walked into the bay, and pulled the door down behind her. Chapter 7. The Wall. He came back the next morning. He was there when Dottie unlocked at 8, standing by the vacuum stations with his rented truck parked crooked and snow on his shoulders, and Tilda walked past him to the bay as if he were a traffic cone. Tilda. Nothing. She uncoiled the hose. She checked the soap lines. She began her day. Tilda, I know all of it. Corinne saw the case come back. Hank told me everything, the courier, the cameras, the 2 hours they erased. I know you never took anything. I know what my mother did. His voice cracked on mother and he let it. And I know what she bought. I know about the surgery. I know why you signed. The hose hissed, water on concrete. Somewhere behind the glass, Dottie stood very still with the coffee pot. 3 years, he said. I looked for 3 years. If you want to hate me, hate me. I have a list you can start from, but say something. She dialed the nozzle from fan to jet and started on the wheels of the first car, and she did not say something. And she did not say something for 6 more days. He learned the shape of her silence, the way he had once learned her sounds in a house in Texas. It was not sulking, and it was not theater. It was a wall, professionally built, and he stood at it every day that week like weather. He bought washes he did not need. He paid, took his change from her chapped red hand, and said thank you, and got a stranger's nod. He waited out her shifts in the cold until Dottie, unable to stand the sight of a man losing at that speed, brought him coffee she pretended was left over. You the reason she scrubs clean cars? Dottie asked him. I'm the reason she's here at all, Deacon said. None of it good. Huh. Dottie considered him, arms folded, 60-some years of reading customers. She watched the road behind us for 2 years, you know. Whatever ran her out of Texas, she thought it might follow. She handed him the coffee. question you should be asking, mister, isn't why she won't talk to you. It's why she's still watching that road. On the 7th day, he broke and begged. It happened at closing, in the empty lot, in falling snow, and it was not elegant, and he did not care. He put himself in her path so she had to stop or walk through him, and Tilda stopped and stood there in her soaked apron with her eyes level, and Deacon Ambrose, who had never in his life asked twice for anything, asked for the 20th time, and this time it came out with the floor missing under it. 1 second, he said. On the steps. I know you counted it. I have counted it every day for 3 years. She said the cameras don't lie, and for 1 second, I let 38 years of that woman answer instead of 1 year of you. And I will not stand here and tell you it didn't happen, because you saw it happen, and it is the thing I would give the rest of my life to take back. His breath came out ragged and white. I am not asking you to forgive it. I am asking you to tell me why you left out loud, so that her version of you stops being the only one on record. I know why. Milo's alive and running because of what you signed. Just say it. Say she made you. Say it once, and I swear I will build the whole world back up around it. The snow came down between them, and Tilda looked at him, and for one moment the wall was just a woman standing in a parking lot with 3 winters behind her eyes, and her lips parted, and Deacon Ambrose stopped breathing. Your change, she said, is in the drawer, and walked to the bus stop. What broke her was not him. He never knew that. What broke her was waiting at her own apartment 2 evenings later, at a complex off Valmont Road, parked in a hired black car with the engine running against the cold, and it stepped out in a long grey coat as Tilda came up the walk, and the 3 years between Texas and Colorado closed like a door. You look well, Sandra Ambrose said. Colorado agrees with you. May I come up? No. Wise. We'll be brief then. Tilda's keys were in her fist, one blade out between her knuckles, an old habit from motels. You said if I stayed gone, it was finished. You did stay gone, admirably. It is my son who came here, and I cannot have it. Sandra's breath ghosted in the cold, unhurried. So we will review the arithmetic once, quietly, and then I will fly home. The statement you signed still exists. The case against you was never dismissed with prejudice. Dear, it was merely allowed to sleep, and Texas gives felony theft 5 years of nights. 2 of those years remain. 1 telephone call, and the district attorney rediscovers his confidence, and there is a warrant, and there is extradition, and there is a trial with your signed words read into the record in front of 12 strangers. She paused and delivered the rest gently, which was how she delivered everything fatal. And this time your brother is not a 10-year-old who can be told it's a mistake. He's 13. He will sit in that courtroom because he will refuse not to. He will hear what you signed and what you cuffed, and be old enough to understand every word, and young enough for it to become the architecture of the rest of his life. I paid to fix that child's heart once. Do not make me be the reason it breaks. You would do it, Tilda said, knowing I'm innocent, knowing you built the film yourself. You'd still do it. I built a door and you walked through it carrying a case. That is what a jury will see. And yes. For an instant, something almost tired crossed the older woman's face, the closest thing to human weather Tilda had ever witnessed on it. You think I do this out of hate? I have never hated you. I do this because 100 years of careful does not get spent on love, and someone in every generation has to be the one who does not get to be soft. It was me. Look at yourself, girl. 3 years of scrubbing wheels to keep a boy's heart beating. You understand better than my own children do. She drew her coat closed. Send my son home. Make it hold this time. You know how. You have always known how. And if I tell him you were here, then you have chosen the trial, Sandra said without heat, and got into the car, and the car pulled away down Valmont with its taillights reddening the snow, and Tilda stood on the walk until she could not feel her hands. She did it the next evening, at the wash, at closing, And she did it well, because Sandra was right. She had always known how. You break a thing clean by using the truth as the handle. She waited until Dottie had gone and let him find her cleaning out the drawer, and she looked up at him with a face she had spent one entire sleepless night pouring concrete into. "You want to hear it out loud?" she said. "All right, here it is out loud. Your mother offered me a deal, and I took it in one day. One day, Deacon, I didn't agonize, I didn't fight. She put a paper in front of me and I thought, there it is, the exit, and I signed. And the truth I have been too polite to say is that it was a relief." She watched the words land, each one the way you watch nails go in. "You were a warm house in a cold year, and I needed one, and I am grateful. But you were asking me to spend my life fighting your family for a seat at a table I never wanted, and your mother offered me my brother and a clean start instead, and I chose them without looking back. I would choose them again tonight. You didn't lose me on those steps with your 1 second. There was nothing to lose. I know you came a long way to hear something better than that. There isn't anything better than that." She took his hand, and for one blinding instant hope went across his face like a searchlight, and she turned his hand over and pressed into it the folded bills from the washes he had bought all week. Every dollar counted. "Your change," she said. "All of it. Go home, Deacon." He stood in the empty bay for a long time after she had gone, a man in a Houston coat holding small bills in a Colorado winter, and then he drove to Denver through the dark and flew home on the last flight, and somewhere over the middle of the country, he stopped watching the horizon. In River Oaks, at the tall window at the end of the hall, Sandra Ambrose took the call, listened, said only, "Good night then," and stood watching her son's headlights come up the drive, home, hollow, hers, and her face gave away nothing at all, because there was nothing left on the board to take. And in Boulder, in the lit bay on 28th Street, Tilda Mercer washed a car that was already clean. She started on the hood at 9, and she was still on the fender at 10, dragging the mitt in slow circles over flawless paint, around and around, breathing in, holding it, breathing out, until Dottie, watching from the office door with her keys in her hand, finally turned off the lights and made her stop. Chapter 8. The safe Deacon Ambrose came home to Houston to bury himself, and instead he dug something up. He gave it 4 days, 4 days of the downtown apartment, the coffee maker, the work he no longer felt. Then, on the 5th morning, he drove out to Lazy Lane one last time, because the decision had finished forming somewhere over Kansas at 30,000 feet. He was done. Not angry, which requires hope. Done. He would take the one thing in that house that had ever belonged to him without a price tag, his father's watch, the plain steel one, and he would resign the family the way you resign a job, and whatever 100 years of careful weighed, it could be weighed by someone else. His mother was at the club. Whitley's car was in the drive, but the house at midday keeps everyone in separate weather. He went to the study, and he opened the safe, because the combination was still his birthday and his father's, one number of each, and he reached in past the deed folders for the watch box. His hand stopped. Behind the folders, wrapped in a chamois cloth, square-cornered, brass-cornered, the color of tobacco. He lifted it out, the way you lift something that might be wired. He set it on the desk where Corinne had once come back for a coffee tray, and he unlatched it. And there it was, his great-grandfather's collection. A century of gold in fitted velvet, every coin seated, every seal from the last appraisal unbroken, the little numbered stickers exactly where the insurance man had pressed them 4 years ago. It had never been sold. It had never been moved. It had gone down the drive in the rain, into a plain car, into Hank Merrill's guilty keeping, and then it had come home to this steel box, 8 feet from where his mother drank her morning coffee, and it had slept there through 3 years of his searching, a trophy in a vault, close enough to touch every single day. He was still standing over it when he saw the ledger. It lay beneath where the case had sat, a slim foundation binder, the family's charitable arm, the one his mother chaired. He might never have opened it. He opened it because the corner of one page was flagged. In his mother's habit, a woman who aligned everything with the edge of something. Grant authorizations, spring, 3 years ago. And there, in the clean type of the family's generosity, a payment to Texas Children's Hospital, pediatric cardiac program, patient sponsorship, authorized by the chair. He read the date and read it again, and the study went very quiet around him. The authorization was dated one morning after Tilda Mercer signed her statement in the Harris County Jail. Not before, not a kindness that curdled. After, a settlement, a receipt, Hank had said, not knowing he was quoting her exactly. His mother had sat across a scarred table from a 24-year-old with cracked hands and priced a child's heartbeat against her silence and paid on delivery and filed the invoice because 100 years of careful keeps its paperwork. Deacon stood in his father's study, holding a century of gold and 1 page of arithmetic, and the 1 second on the front steps, the second he had spent 3 years serving like a sentence, finally showed him its whole face. He had doubted the wrong person for 1 second. His mother had doubted no one and destroyed everyone calmly, on schedule, and then watched him grieve across her dinner table 4 times a year. He did not shout. He was his mother's son in one way only, and it was this one. He carried the case and the ledger to the living room, set them on the piano beside his own photograph, and called the house to assembly. They came. Sondra from the club, unhurried, drawing off her gloves. Whitley from her wing, already pale, because Whitley had recognized the case from the doorway and had to hold the back of a chair. "I came for the watch," Deacon said. "I found the family instead." What followed was not the scene the audience of such families imagines, the roaring, the shattered glass. It was worse, because it was quiet, and everyone in the room understood everything almost immediately, which left nothing to do but be who they were. Sondra looked at the gold on the piano for a long moment. Then she sat down in her chair, the one that faced the room, and folded her hands. "You were never meant to open that safe angry," she said. "That is my only regret about today." "Say it," Deacon said. "All of it. You owe me 11 seconds of film's worth of truth. Start with the courier." And she did. That was the thing about his mother that he would carry the longest, that when concealment stopped being useful, she abandoned it without sentiment, like a coat in warm weather. She laid it out in the voice of a chairwoman, reviewing minutes. The caterer's girl, the camera contract, Whitley's driver's cousin at the gate, Hank's 20 years of paperwork held in her other hand, the hallway camera's 2-hour illness, the grey dress for the jail, the statement, the surgery, the schedule kept to the day, and the 3 years of warm trails fed to his investigators, Atlanta, Memphis, all of it hers. "You bought her confession with the boy's operation," Deacon said. "You knew she was innocent. You built her innocence yourself, brick by brick, and then you made her sign the opposite, and you priced it at his heart." "I priced it at his heart, because his heart was the only currency she valued," Sondra said. "You do not negotiate with people in a language they don't speak. She would have died in a cell before she took money. The child was the door." She said it, the way she said everything, softly, exactly, and then she looked up at her son, and delivered the sentence the whole story had been walking toward. "You want remorse. I will give you accuracy instead. Given the same board, I would do it again tomorrow. I did not do it to hurt a housekeeper. I did it because someone in every generation pays the cost of keeping this family whole, and I have paid it since before you were born. And the proof that I was right is standing in this room in a suit his grandfather's name bought." "The proof," Deacon said, "washes cars in Colorado." It was Whitley who broke. It came up out of her all at once, 3 years of it, and she stood by the piano with her fists at her sides and sobbed like the girl she had been before the audition started, and it poured out of her in pieces, the driver, the cousin, the phone call to the police she had made because her mother had glanced at her, the price tag she had left like a child leaving bite marks, and underneath all of it, the one confession that mattered. "I knew by that night," Whitley wept. "I knew when the hallway camera failed. Nobody told me, and I knew, and I said the pill. I said I sat with her, and I have said it in my head every day since. Mama, she had a little brother. He used to wave at me, and I let them put her in a car." She turned to Deacon, wrecked and open. "Whatever you're going to do, I'll say it anywhere, under oath, to her face, anywhere." "There," Sandra said quietly, into her daughter's sobbing, "goes the second generation." Deacon picked up the ledger and the case. "Here is what happens now," he said. "The gold gets photographed exactly where it lived, by people whose job that is. Corinne's statement exists, Hank's exists. Whitley's apparently is coming. The statement Tilda signed dies in the light, and every hour you spend fighting, that is an hour this family spends on the front page. I am not asking for your remorse. I am informing you of your position. You taught me the difference yourself." He stopped at the door. "You said someone in every generation doesn't get to be soft. You were wrong about which one of us it is." He was in the drive, loading the case into his car with his hands finally steady, when through the tall window he saw his mother rise, cross to the study, and pick up the telephone. He thought even then that she was calling her lawyer. Cornered queens call lawyers. It was the last time in his life he underestimated her. Sandra Ambrose, holding a lost board for the first time in 60 years, chose fire. The call was to Austin first, then to a man in the district attorney's orbit, golf close, favor-heavy, and her voice never rose, and the words were simple. The family had reviewed the old theft. New resolve. The signed statement. The statute had 2 years left in it. The family wished the case revived, formally, immediately, whatever came. If she could not keep her son, she would burn the bridge he was crossing and the woman standing on it. 2 mornings later, in Boulder, under a hard blue Colorado sky, Tilda Mercer came out of the wash bay drying her hands on her apron and found a man waiting by the vacuum stations who was not Deacon. He was local, polite, and tired, and he held up a Boulder police detective's badge with the particular apology of a man doing a faraway city's errand. "Tilda Mercer, there's a matter out of Harris County, Texas. I'm going to need you to come with me." Behind the office glass, Dottie was already reaching for the phone. And down the block, just off the school bus with his backpack on both shoulders, Milo Mercer stopped on the sidewalk and watched, for the second time in his life, a police officer standing between him and his sister. This time he did not freeze. He ran. Chapter 9. What Milo was worth. They did not arrest her. That mattered less than it should have. The detective was doing a courtesy interview at Harris County's request, and it ended within the hour, and Tilda walked out of the Boulder Public Safety Building into the hard blue afternoon, a free woman with a Texas clock ticking somewhere behind her, and Milo was on the bench outside, and Dottie beside him, and the boy's face told her that the running was already over, whether she agreed to it or not. She agreed to nothing. She went home and started packing. It was midnight when Milo appeared in her doorway, and she was kneeling over the second duffel bag, rolling shirts the way you roll them when you have done it before. And he stood there in the hall light, 13 years old, 4 inches taller than her memory kept insisting, and he said, "Sit down, Tilda." "Milo, go back to bed. We'll talk in the—" "Sit down." He had never used that voice in his life. It was their mother's voice, and it worked on both of them equally, and Tilda sat down slowly on the edge of the bed among her rolled shirts. Milo stayed in the doorway. "Dottie told me about the man, the one who stood in the snow for a week buying washes. She told me tonight because she said somebody in this family had to stop being a vault." He swallowed. "It was him, wasn't it? From the big house. The one who taught me the spiral. And the police today is Texas, and Texas is the gold, and the gold is why we left, and you were about to put me in a car at midnight and tell me somewhere better." His voice did not crack. He had practiced too long for that, years ago in a bathroom, and she heard the practicing in it anyway. "I'm not 10 anymore. You tell me all of it right now, or I swear I will call that man myself, because Dottie has his card." So she told him. She told it sitting on the edge of the bed with her hands quiet in her lap, and she left nothing out, because half a truth is what had gotten them here. The attaché case in the rain, the 11 seconds, the 1 second, the grey dress across the scarred table, a hope against a heartbeat, the paper she signed, and what it purchased, and what it cost, and the calendar with the red circles, and why the circles had been kept. The snow last winter, the begging in the parking lot, the change pressed back into his hand counted, and the woman in the long coat on the walk off Valmont, and the courtroom she had been promised he would sit in. Milo listened the whole way through without moving. When it was finished, he was quiet for a long time, and when he finally spoke, he asked the only question she had never once, in 3 years, allowed herself to hold up to the light. "So, my heart," he said, "cost you your whole life, and you paid it, and then you kept paying it, and you never asked me. You were 10. I'm not asking about then." His eyes were wet now, and he let them be, which she had never managed, which meant he was already braver. "I'm asking about the math, Tilda, because I've done it sitting here, and I need you to hear my answer, even though it's late. If anybody had asked me, ever, at any age, whether I wanted my valve fixed at the price of my sister going to jail for something she didn't do, and lying to a good man's face, and scrubbing wheels in the cold for 3 years, and packing duffel bags at midnight for the rest of our lives," and here his voice finally went, 13 years old at 1 in the morning, "I would have said no. I would rather have taken my chances with my own heart than watch what they did to yours. That was my heart, and it should have been partly my choice, and you took it alone." Tilda looked at her little brother standing in the doorway and gave him the truth she had been carrying longest of all. "That's why it couldn't be your choice," she said, "because you would have said no, and I could survive everything they did to me, Milo. I could not have survived burying you." He crossed the room then, and she stood up, and he was taller than her now, which neither of them had ever officially acknowledged, and he put his arms around his sister, and they stood there among the rolled shirts, and it was Milo who said the last of it into her shoulder. "Then we stopped running, both of us. You always say somewhere better." He pulled back and looked at her. "It's here. We're already in it. Make them come to us." They came, but not the way Sandra Ambrose had promised. What arrived over the following weeks was not a warrant. It was a collapse, and it happened the way collapses actually happen, not through one hero with one speech, but through frightened and guilty people finally acting in their own interest and their own conscience at the same time, which is the only combination that ever moves the world. Hank Merrill moved first, because the revived case named the gold, and the gold's trail ran straight through his front hall, and a man who had golfed with a secret for 3 years understood instantly that he was about to be the only person in the story without a deal. His lawyer contacted the Harris County District Attorney's office before the week was out. Voluntary statement, full cooperation, the call before the rain, the courier, the case held, and the case returned. Whitley kept her wrecked, open promise. She gave her statement in a conference room downtown, with her mother's lawyer conspicuously absent, and she said it all under oath, the driver, the cousin, the pill she never watched anyone take, the hallway camera nobody had to explain to her. Somewhere in the middle, she stopped crying and never started again, and the attorney taking it down noted that the witness appeared to grow calmer as the statement progressed, which is what happens when a person puts down a piano they have been carrying. The gold was photographed exactly where it lived, seals intact, insurance stickers in place, by people whose job that was, in a study on Lazy Lane, while Sandra Ambrose sat in the sunroom among her orchids and declined, through counsel, to be present. And the machine, once fed the truth, ran the same direction it had once run against Tilda, because machines have no loyalty, only fuel. The district attorney's office, presented with a recanting recipient, a sworn family witness, physical evidence that the stolen property had never been stolen, and a signed statement now radioactive with coercion, did not merely decline to revive the case. It closed it, formally, with prejudice, in writing, and opened a quiet inquiry of its own into the original report, because filing a false police report is a crime in Texas, and so is fabricating evidence, and the trail of both ran up a long oak-lined drive to a tall window on the second floor. Deacon was in Boulder for all of it and rescued nothing, which was the hardest work he had ever done. His lawyers could have flown in like weather. He kept them in Houston. He forwarded documents, answered questions when asked, sat in the back at the courtesy interviews, and otherwise did the only thing left that meant anything, which was to be there, daily, without terms. He rented a small place off Pearl Street on a month-to-month lease he kept renewing. He bought washes he did not need from a woman who still handed him his change. He came to Milo's winter meet and stood apart from them at the fence line in the cold and left before the awards. And Milo, jogging past with his medal, said, "You came," and Deacon said, "I'll always come." And that was the entire conversation, and the boy carried it home like something warm in a pocket. The letter from Harris County arrived on a Tuesday in late February, dismissed with prejudice, closed. Dottie read it out loud twice in the office, once fast and once slow, and then shut the wash for the afternoon, an event without precedent, and made them all sit down over green chili at a diner on Pearl Street while the mountains went pink in the window. And under the table Milo held his sister's hand, and Tilda Mercer sat in the middle of her own life, unpacked, unhunted, free in the full legal and larger senses of the word, and let herself feel approximately half of it. It was that evening, walking back along Pearl Street with the cold coming down clean off the flat irons, that she stopped and let Milo and Dottie drift ahead toward the car, and turned to the man who had walked half a step behind her for 3 months without once asking for anything, and asked him the question she had been carrying since a blue morning on a front step in Texas. "At the arrest," Tilda said, "when your mother spoke. Why did you hesitate?" Chapter 10. Chautauqua. He did not answer quickly, and she counted that in his favor. A quick answer would have been a prepared one, and she had already had a lifetime of the Ambrose family's prepared things. They stood on Pearl Street in the cold, under the string lights, with Milo and Dottie waiting by the car pretending not to watch, and Deacon looked at her and gave her the truth with all its unflattering weight, the way she had once handed him a jar in a pantry. "Because for 38 years, being her son worked," he said. "Every room I ever walked into, her judgment had already been right about it. Her judgment built the company. Her judgment picked my schools, buried my father without one wrong note, kept 100 years of that family upright. I grew up inside a mind that was never wrong out loud, and when you grow up inside that, doubt gets trained into you like a dog. She said the cameras don't lie, and for 1 second the dog sat. He let the wind take that and did not flinch from it. It was not that I believed you were a thief. I've checked that second every night for 3 years, and that was never in it. It was that I could not yet believe she was one. That is the whole answer, Tilda. It is not good enough, and it never will be, and I am not asking you to grade it. You asked why. That is why. And now I know what she is, and I know what it cost you, and I know what you did in that jail with a pen, and I have spent 3 months on this street learning the only lesson left." He glanced down the block, at the mountains holding the last light. "That I cannot buy back 1 second. I can only be on time for everyone that comes after. That's what the apartment is. That's what the fence line at the meets is. I'm not here to take you anywhere, Tilda. Your somewhere better already exists. You built it with a hose and a night class and that kid's report card. I'm just asking to stand in it, at whatever distance you set, for as long as it takes, including forever, including never. She looked at him for a long moment, 3 winters long, and then she went to the car, and he let her go, and that was February. What happened next was not a scene, it was a season. It was Deacon learning the wash's rhythms until Dottie put him to work one slammed Saturday out of pure necessity, and the sight of him in a borrowed apron doing wheels badly, then less badly, under Tilda's merciless instruction. It was the sports page, folded on top, appearing on the office desk on Sunday mornings, and neither of them saying anything about it, which was how they had always said everything. It was Milo's spring meets and the fence line, and then one raw April afternoon, without any discussion, the fence line dissolving, and Deacon standing with them. It was Whitley's letter, 4 pages, unanswered for a month, and then answered in 3 lines that ended, "You were the one who told the truth under oath. Start from there. Come in the summer." It was the news from Houston arriving like reports from a country Tilda no longer held a passport to. The inquiry, the settlement. Sondra Ambrose stepping down from her own foundation, unindicted and undefeated in posture only, alone in a pale, enormous house whose kitchen no longer told the truth to anyone because no one was in it. Deacon signed away his stake in the family holdings that spring, keeping only what his father had left him outright, and if Houston called it madness, Boulder never heard about it. He was by then quietly building something small and his own, and the story does not need its details because he had finally learned which page to start from. Somebody wins in sports. The last of it happened in May at Chautauqua on a Sunday morning with the meadow going green up toward the Flatirons and snow still holding in the high seams of the rock. Dottie had packed food nobody needed that much of. Milo ran the trail ahead, the way he ran everywhere now, on a heart that owed nothing to anyone because his sister had settled the account in full a long time ago. Tilda walked slower and stopped where the meadow opens, and stood looking up at the mountains with the wind moving in the grass, and Deacon stopped a few steps behind her at the distance she had set, which he had never once crossed. She thought about doors, the locked one on Nordling Road with her father's television flickering behind it, the easy one Sondra had offered first, and the terrible one offered second. The bay door she had pulled down against him in the snow. Her whole life had been other people's doors. She turned around. Deacon. Yes. She looked at him standing in the grass in the morning light, the man who had waited out 3 winters and a wall and never asked for a grade, and she gave him the first word she had ever given him freely, with nothing purchased and nothing owed on either side of them. "Walk with us," Tilda said. He came up the trail and fell in beside her, half a step back out of 3 months of habit, and she reached over without ceremony and took his hand and corrected the distance, and they went on up through the meadow like that, toward the boy running ahead in the sunlight, and neither of them said anything else, and everything got said. Ahead, Milo reached the trail bend and turned around and saw them, and grinned, and did not stop running. Somewhere better. She had always said it. It had always been going to be true.